resilient writer come and write with me, which was very exciting. But I know that our Discord is dusty is maybe the right word. It occasionally, gets dusted off and we have a little conversation and then it sort of dies again. So just a reminder to our writers that we do have this as a resource to you. It is intended to be a place where you can do lots of different things. So chat with each other, get tips, ask questions. Essentially, we were hoping that it would sort of occur as a more collaborative, like email, right? If you might have emailed one of us previously, it's an opportunity to chat with us instead so that others can potentially benefit from your knowledge. And our office hours also occur in that Discord channel in the voice channel. So I had two writers who emailed me who were like, "Oh, I would have come to office hour, but I waited for a Zoom link." So I think that that may also be something that's happening. So as a reminder, that is all in the Discord. If you want to write us and email us to ask us a question, whether about the Discord or in general, certainly feel free to, but it's just there as another resource for you. And we would love to see it be a little more active than it presently is. Does anyone else have anything about the Discord that they want to jump in and chat about? I know, Julie, that you've been pretty involved in there, but I know that it's been tough. Okay, great. I will keep rolling then. Oh, maybe not. Okay, we're all good.
Yeah, I mostly I was just gonna say, also if something else would work better, we are at the time where we can maybe pivot really fast. So
Mhm.
please give us feedback about this via email or right now on this chat, even just personally. That would be great because we want this to be helpful to you all. And Discord, I know, can be new to some people. So thanks, Lauren.
Mhm. Yeah. But yes, if there is a preference another way, I know that like I tend to be a little hesitant about using Discord for work things because for me Discord is for personal stuff and Slack is for work things. But if there is something that we can be using that is more helpful, we're certainly always happy to do that too. Okay. We'll keep going. Agenda for today. So you're here and it's wonderful. And we're going to start with some progress check-ins and a little bit of Q&A from you all. So if you have any questions specifically about the writing process, there'll be some time to ask those. And then we'll get into sort of the meat of tips for getting started with science writing. And then we'll wrap up by 7:30. So in a little over an hour, we will have you out of here, hopefully for dinner and resting for the rest of your day. So you all should roughly be at the point where you've conducted your interview and now it's time to write. So let's start by checking in with each other, basic introductions, name, location, what you study in your current position. And then I'm hoping that you all could share a fun fact, a quote, or an idea from your case subject that you got during your interview that you thought was particularly exciting or energizing or interesting. It does not have to be an exact quote. You don't need to go start digging into your notes for something, but just something that off of the top of your head that you enjoyed about the experience and something that you sort of took away or are excited to write about, and then maybe a challenge that you're worried about in the writing process. I believe that you all essentially know us. So I figured we would start with writers since you can speak to the case study writing process and we're not doing that. So I will look at who's first on my screen. So I have Zolmari at the top of my screen. And we can popcorn, so you can popcorn to the next person.
Hi. Name is Mari. I'm in Texas, Dallas.
We can't
I'm.
hear you.
Oh, really? Oh, shit.
Oh,
Oh, now you're
that
good.
was better.
Something
Oh,
happened.
really? Oh, well, maybe crime works. Okay. Name Zulmari. I'm on Texas, Dallas. Currently, I'm a postdoc at UT Dallas. And I think a very fun fact, or rather than fun, I think that was kind of, I don't know, I felt so identified with my case because we both share the possibility to interact with indigenous people. So when I was on my undergraduate career, I spent 7 months on a rural internship on the Amazonian forest, and we had that in common with Crystal. which was amazing. Actually, we had kind of this feedback, and actually, I think that we became friends. She was like, "Please visit me. I would love to chat about this with a coffee." So it was amazing. And a challenge you are worried about. I feel that I have something written already. I've been writing on December. Uh, and I feel that it is still a mess. It's like, so I'm still figuring out. And I know that we have some time for the first draft for sending that, and I hope to figure it out from that time. Yeah. Thank you.
Do you want to pass it to somebody else?
Oh, do I have that power?
You do. You do have that power.
Ooh,
You can
ooh.
pick any of
Uh,
us.
Jennifer Baker. Yeah. Hi.
Hi. Sure. I'm Jen. I'm a postdoc at Dartmouth, studying cystic fibrosis, and lung infections. Um, my interview with Ting was really, really fun to chat. I think we ended up recruiting people that like were all interested in science communication and kind of have some common concerns. So I think I ended up like sharing a little bit about myself as well as interviewing her, which was a great point of connection. Um, and she was very enthusiastic. I think one of the things that came away from that interview thinking about is she talked a lot about um like the group that she works with. So there's other people that have maybe more formal science communication training than she does. And so I think it would be like really fun to talk to her team and get more like concrete things about how did you get trained types of questions that I didn't get answered in the interview. So I don't know. It's just something that I've been thinking about is do I care that that's not in my case study or not? So I don't know. Still mulling it over, but insights would be helpful if anyone has ideas. So I think I see Emily.
Hi everyone, my name's Emily. I use she, her pronouns. I am in St. Paul, Minnesota, and currently I am teaching undergraduates at Macalester College. I finished my PhD earlier, I guess last year, and I studied cellular dysfunction in Parkinson's disease. Something really cool that Charlotte Vaughn, who is my case subject, does is she, both for recruitment but also for public engagement, conducts a lot of her studies out of a museum that's based in Washington, D.C. So I thought that was a super cool way to approach that. And I think my biggest challenge is just finding the time, or I guess protecting the time and being intentional about that to sit down and do the writing. I'm going to popcorn to Maya.
Okay. Hello, I'm Maya. Fifth year PhD student at Yale. I'm in New Haven, Connecticut. Um, and I guess fun fact is the person I interviewed also did her PhD at Yale. So asked her how much has changed, which was kind of nice to have that connection. But also, she works on AI like evaluation, which is like something I don't know that much about. So it was interesting learning about the different concerns and questions that she's interested in probing the systems. Like, are they achieving the goal that they're being designed to, essentially? Just a lot of food for thought. It was really interesting. But yeah. And I've only written some summaries of what we talked about, but I guess I'm not quite sure how to structure the conversation. I guess that's the main challenge. But yeah, and I'll popcorn to, I don't know, Meredith.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Sorry that my camera's off. I'm in the midst of a commute. For those who don't know me, I'm part of the SEEDS team. I am based in the Washington, D.C. area, and for my day job, I work at the Howard Hughes Medical Institute on open science policies and practices. And I don't think that I quite have precise answers to the other questions just because I'm not writing a case study, but I will just say that something that I have struggled with writing in the past is the distinction between things that are really interesting to me versus things that go into a good story. I think sometimes when you're doing an interview, there can be a lot of really interesting tidbits and facts, but figuring out how they all fit together and what actually goes into a coherent story can sometimes be one of the biggest challenges. So I don't know if that resonates with any of you, but that's something that has been relatable to me in the past. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, that the only writer who has not gone yet is Olivia. So I'm going to popcorn to Olivia.
Olivia mentioned that that she can't unmute at the moment. So her introduction is in the chat. In case you cannot access the chat, I will briefly read it. So she's a fifth year PhD student at UCSF. No problem. Understand. Have to run experiments where you need to be quiet. So she's currently a fifth year PhD student at UCSF. She interviewed Lomax Boyd. Lomax is also a SEEDS collaborator. So his research focuses on the scientific and ethical questions raised by experimental models of the human brain, including brain organoids and grafted organoids, human brain chimeras, and genetically engineered non-human animals. It was fun to connect with a scientist who conducts research trying to understand the ethical and moral considerations of the public, not just the scientific community. One of the challenges that she's hoping to overcome is communicating philosophical ideas and jargon in a case study that is digestible for all people. And given Lomax's research and your summary of it, I can understand absolutely why that might be a bit of a challenge. And then I really liked what Meredith did with introducing or reintroducing herself a little bit and then saying something that you've interacted with as a challenge in writing. So I'm going to go ahead and do that and then popcorn to our other leadership team as well. So again, Lauren, I am currently finishing up a postdoc at Harvard University. I'm an incoming faculty member at the College of New Jersey, which is very exciting. I went on the job market this year, so I'm grateful to be done. I have done science writing for a really long time. I've been involved with ComSciCon since 2020. I run ComSci Conversations, which is our in-house blog. So if you're ever interested in doing some science writing after this project and publishing with us, we'd love to have you. And a challenge that I often have in the writing process is figuring out how to start and how to end. I feel like I'm really good with understanding what needs to be in the middle, but really struggle with how to hook my reader at the start and then how to summarize everything at the end. I really like getting into the meat of things, but I struggle with some blank page analysis paralysis, if that is familiar to anybody. And I will popcorn to M.
Thanks, Lauren. Hello, everybody. So I'm Emily Costa. I'm one of the SEEDS leads folks as well, so same as Meredith. I am a civic science associate is my title, which means kind of nothing unless you're me, at Rockefeller University in New York, out of our outreach group called RockEDU. I'm kind of between there and a foundation called the Rita Allen Foundation that runs a fellowship program in civic science. It's really cool. It's like science and society work. I highly recommend looking it up if that's something that you're into. But so I work there and have been with ComSciCon for a bit in like various capacities. And I'm very stoked to be pitching it with Seeds. In terms of writing difficulties, I think this is a very common struggle, but I definitely struggle with killing my darlings. And I don't make it easier for myself because I'm very much the kind of person who, to get started on a draft, I just kind of have to dump everything in my head out of my head. So it's, a pretty icky first draft, but like that's okay. That's what first drafts are for. And then I'm like, all right, so here are all of the things that I could say. And then it's kind of like, all right, this is a really cool detail, but does it kind of dilute away from the strength of the point that I'm trying to make? Can it get somebody lost? Can it, like add more confusion, that kind of thing. So that's something that I always struggle with, or rather, it doesn't feel good because, I could talk about science and my kind of stuff all day, but that's not often how you want to be writing. So All right, I will pass on to Sarah.
Hi everyone. I'm Sarah Donofrio. I'm one of the people helping out on the SEEDS team, and I also help out with CompSciCon. So if anyone's interested in starting their own chapter locally of CompSciCon, I'm the person you would talk to about that. I am based in Houston, Texas. I'm wrapping up my PhD. I will be defending in April. So that's very scary and exciting. And in terms of writing challenges, so in the past I did an interview with someone and then had to write up kind of a brief post about it. And what I found really challenging, and I think what Nora is going to talk about later will tie into this, is figuring out what to quote, because I wanted to quote everything, because what the subject said, everything just felt so much better than I could put into my own words. But luckily I had a really good person I was working with who helped me be kind of ruthless and cut down and make sure that I was staying on topic and saying the most important things. And is there
I think we have a couple. I think Julie and
Julie?
Wasudara haven't gone yet.
Okay, I will popcorn Julie.
Sorry, my computer's a little slow. Hi everyone. Hopefully you know me and my name enough. So I'm Julie Fornaseri. I'm a program manager at Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, and have been involved with CompSciCon over the years, kind of starting since 2020, and then kind of helped out till like 2023. And in my role, I do a lot of like transitioning from writing for scientists to just the public and vice versa. And I'm located in Berkeley, or the Bay Area, if my background is not indicative enough. And yeah, I think a lot of the struggles that everyone kind of mentioned with writing, I resonate a lot with. And I think most of the time it is that, like, I think I get stuck of how do I get everything on the paper, or like I get stuck on what is the narrative before I get anything on the paper. And then at some point I just need to have that really bad draft like Em said, to then start seeing like what is that trend, and what is that thread. And I think that is the process. And um, I've learned also editors and just like taking a break from things really help me, because you get really excited about integrating one quote or integrating all the quotes, or having a picture that if someone helps you out, it kind of helps zoom you out of the like weeds of everything. And so sometimes just like taking a break from it is sometimes really helpful, and sometimes it's not, and you get stuck anyways. So that's kind of been my experience. And then with Sundara, do you want to go last but not least?
Hello, can everybody hear me? Okay, okay, great. So hello everyone, I'm Vasundhara. I am a PhD student. I study astronomy, and I'm located in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Um, I'm also one of the SEEDS programming managers, and I've been involved with CompSciCon for the past 2 years, I believe. Yeah, and I think when it comes to writing, I do a lot of scientific writing for as part of the PhD, and something we find kind of difficult is when you have to communicate that to either like you know um, the public, or people who may be like giving us money for our projects. I found it kind of helpful to turn like scientific jargon into like schematic diagrams. Um, so make everything into a picture. That kind of really helps. Yeah.
Makes me think I used to have an advisor that would say if it's a paragraph and it can be a sentence, make it a sentence. So if it's a sentence and it can be a word, make it a word. If it's a word and you can make it a picture, make it a picture. Makes me think of that process. Okay. I
Yeah,
think
that's a very
everybody,
good saying.
yeah, I think that everybody has checked in, which is great. Really glad to hear that interviews have gone really well. You hopefully are at the phase. So we're talking about the case study process, and you've had your kickoff for interviewing your case subject. But what we're here to do today, as we've started doing, is to really talk about what comes next for you all, both practically in terms of what are some of the deadlines that you're going to be looking at, what does the process look like from here, as well as thinking about what you all need in terms of making sure that these pieces are something that you're proud of and that accomplishes your goals as well as the SEEDS mission. So you're going to draft and edit your case study. There's 3 drafts in total that you'll go through, including the final one. You'll get feedback from your peers as well as from SEEDS team mentors. And you're basically taking your transcript and turning it into a case study itself. So I was hoping that we could take around 5 minutes for any questions that you have at this point about where you are in the process. And we're thinking of these things as being more like, is there anything that is currently keeping you from accomplishing your next goals? We're going to go through the timeline a little bit more specifically in a moment as well, if there are timeline questions. But if there's questions about, I'm not sure what you're looking for, I don't know what comes next, I'm feeling a way about something potentially being missing from my case study. So this could be a good time to talk about what if there are others on the team who have more of that science communication experience. So if there are any burning questions that you all are currently sort of experiencing, just taking a few minutes to go through those.
I have a quick question. Is there like a format for a case study that we can refer to? Like, I'm not sure if they're all supposed to be like the same format or like standardized in some way. I mean, like, yeah, that's my question because I've never written one. I've done other types of writing, but I'm not quite sure like what this. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Sarah, you just added some resources to our writing document, right?
I did, yes. So at the end of the document, I included, I think there are 3 links from different websites, just of many examples of different kind of profiles for scientists. I think we'll talk about this a little bit more on a later slide, but one of the things we wanted was to keep the format for your case studies kind of open and allow you to be creative and do whatever feels right, maybe experiment and try a different writing style. We do want it to be between 1,000 and 1,500 words. But other than that, as long as the focus is on ethics and how the person you interviewed incorporates that, I think you'll be accomplishing that goal.
Well, thank you.
Jen or Emily, was it one of you that had the question about science communication and other team members?
Yeah, that was me.
Yeah.
Ting had talked about she has like it sounds like they're paid nonprofit employees of PG Ed, which is her outreach project that she like founded and runs. So she had kind of mentioned like I'm the one that shows up with enthusiasm and no training. And because I was asking her about resources, like how did you learn? And that was basically like her spiel. But hinted at the fact that she hired people that had like other experiences and like maybe more concrete training experiences than her kind of her narrative that she shared of her own life in the ways that she was kind of informally trained. So I guess I wasn't sure if you wanted if the idea would be to chase that down or would be to really focus on Ting's experience as like one person, and kind of say like the way that she executed is founding and directing, and those other stories are not hers necessarily. So I didn't know how much we wanted to dilute the one person profile. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it definitely does. I'm wondering if Em or Meredith, who wrote the grant and have these ideas about the intentions of SEEDS, might have something to weigh in about.
I guess I would be curious about sort of what she describes of these other folks in terms of like their training and what they're bringing. But I do think that in terms of like what we're ultimately interested in capturing is how folks like what approaches they take to try and engage with ethics and like understand them more. That first kind of step of just like understanding and learning, and then being like, okay, how can I actually apply this to my research and how I think about it? So I would argue that then, like, it sounds like at least one of her approaches was, I mean, certainly like working with other folks to start this nonprofit, but then also deferring to people with like expertise that is outside of her own personal realm of study to be like, I want to tackle these issues. I don't have the scholarly grounding that I want to, or like the experience that I want to, but I can find and work with and hire people who do. So I think like that is definitely relevant to mention. And even just like if she shared how she kind of went about that or finding those people and like, her kind of the way that she sort of built out the organization from what she was learning from them, I think that is really, really cool to capture because that is something that is like, unusual, right? Of kind of like you're building a project adjacent to your science. And to do that, you're reaching outside of your own field of research to find these folks and be like, hey, I want to build this with you because you know these things better than I do. So I think that would be cool to showcase and explore. Um, I guess in terms of like what other folks are doing, I think I wouldn't want to lose the focus too much on Ting, just to kind of show the thread of like this is like a person who's doing this work, and that also helps us with comparing across the other case studies that'll be that way. But certainly, if you showcase like any initiatives that other folks are doing within the organization, that's definitely stuff that we can like embed or like link to as references, for like further learning and exploration, and give like a little bit of context about them, but kind of like keep to the main narrative. Meredith, what do you think? I'm gonna tag you in.
I don't have anything in particular to add to what you just said. I think that was very well put, and I generally agree.
Cool. Okay. Thank you. Sounds good.
Thanks. That was very helpful.
And Sarah also has some nice feedback in the chat as well, if you'd like to take a look. So
Yeah,
lots of different perspectives. Yeah.
Yeah, I can read it. I wanted to put it in before I forgot, and not interrupt. But yeah, I think embracing that informal training and how she collaborated with others, like Emily said, that's really valuable in its own right, because I anticipate that from all the case studies, everyone's going to have a different level of involvement and way that they go about it. And so it's not to say that Ting's way is like not as good as someone who has formal training. It's just different. And I think it'll be really cool to showcase that and have her example in the collection.
Any other burning questions before we get to like the timeline and word count and those sorts of logistics? Right. Well, exciting. The couple of questions that we had suggest that you all are really thinking deeply about this, which is really great. So, to get into a little bit of what's coming next, at the end of the month is your preliminary draft deadline. So, January 26th. When we say draft, please know that we mean this in the loosest sense of the word, particularly for this first one. Outline with bullet points, totally fine. Notes on your interview of where you think you want to put things, a great thing to include for us. This does not need to be even a polished rough draft, right? We're not expecting that you have a full piece written out. At this point, we really just want to see where your thought process is. And these little like goalposts are really meant to keep you active within seeds more than meant to be pressure or pain points. So if you have questions, you're not quite ready to put things together, please know that it is okay and don't feel stressed about this. You have other draft deadlines. So you have a second draft deadline in mid-February, which is going to be followed by your first peer review session, then a second draft deadline, another peer review session, and then your final draft is due in mid-April. So still lots of time ahead to sort of work on this. You're still at the very start of this part of the process. And you upload these to the case study drafts Google Drive folder. And then the peer review sessions are small groups that are done via Zoom. So those are some of the timeline logistics looking forward. And then we figured that there might be some sort of common FAQs. So you received potential interview prompts and questions in this chapter flow that had like chapter 1 through chapter 4 or 5, I think. And there were goals that were associated with each of those chapters. Those were really meant to help with your interview structure, but you are welcome to bring those into your case study if that feels like a nice place to start an outline, or if it feels like it's something that could really help with the flow of your narrative. You can keep that chapter form, but you can also use whatever form feels right for you. So you don't need to feel like you're stuck in that structure, but if it's helpful to have, you're welcome to hang on to it for as long as it serves you. Case studies should be around 1,000 to 1,500 words. It's about making sure that you can paint an accurate portrait of your case subject and what they've gotten up to without verging on, I've written the definitive autobiography of Lomax Boyd. These are that perhaps need to start, as Em put it, starting to cull some of those ideas and really focus on what feels most vital and important for the piece. Outlines, partial drafts, again, totally fine and encouraged. We want you to be thinking in a way that helps you feel creative and excited rather than sort of pressured or having to conform to a particular shape or size or structure. And then we have some events that are designed to help you. So our first public webinar is coming up at the end of the month. It may be of particular interest because it's going to be sort of an introduction to how science and ethics work together. So sort of talking about like formal versus informal training, thinking about ethics really within the research versus as part of outreach. These are things where if you have some questions, the public webinar could have sort of helped you along. Is that face at me? No, not at what I'm saying. Okay. Making sure that I wasn't being totally wrong about public webinars. Great. And
Multitasking
then
shouldn't be. You're good.
you're all good. And then just remember to keep ethics at the core of your piece, because that's really the SEEDS mission. So even more than really needing like a portrait of all of the details of everything that your case study person does, more than this being about right or wrong kinds of science outreach, it really is about the spirit of science ethics and how that is something that is becoming increasingly more important within science communication and within basic research. So keeping ethics sort of at the core. So we have some resources to help you out with this. So in your SEEDS Writers Program Google Drive folder, you have a brand new, and we've referenced it already, case study writing guide. I think some appropriate links have been put into the chat for you all. There's the drafts folder where you will submit your drafts, as well as a program syllabus, code of conduct, things you went over more at the first kickoff that we're not going to go over again today, but they're there if you need them, as well as the contact list to be able to get a hold of us, and the participant statement of work. So lots of good stuff still available there, but most importantly for this point, that new case study writing guide is available. Okay, I have gone through the bit of logistics. Any questions about the logistics before we move into Nora's presentation? Okay, I've counted to 5 silently in my head. If there are any questions at any point, you can always pop them into the chat as well, and we can take a look. Glad that this feels helpful. You'll get a copy of these slides, I believe, as well. So all of this information will remain available to you. So without further ado, it is my great honor and pleasure to say that we have Nora Bradford here to talk to you about sort of getting started with the science communication process. Nora's been doing this for a long time. She does this as a faculty member, as well as a science writer herself. I'll let her introduce herself to you and tell you a little bit more about her science communication journey. But we are collaborators who met at a program in Scotland that's designed for thinking about interdisciplinary science work. So this is something that is certainly often on her mind as well as ours. So without further ado, Nora, thank you so much for being here.
Hi, y'all. Yeah, thank you for the introduction. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and then I'm going to press full screen, and we'll just see how this goes. Okay, cool. Okay, so I have hopefully some things that will be helpful for you at this point in your process. First, I'm just going to talk a little bit about who I am, what kind of work I do, and then from what I've gathered, you've done your interviews, and now you're going to be maybe trying to think about how to integrate quotes and choose quotes from those interviews for your actual piece. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Also, we'll talk about how to sort of grab your reader's attention. So whatever form your case study ends up taking, you'll want to have some sort of like hook to get them interested. So we'll talk about like different ways of approaching that. And then I just have a bunch of slides about sort of resources and programs within science communication outside of SEEDS, which I'm sure you're already familiar with if you've like done SEEDS. You're clearly someone who like looks for these opportunities, but maybe there will be one that you haven't heard of. Yeah, and then I just figured we could chat. Hopefully that'll take up more than half of it, but we'll see how fast I get through these. So yeah. So who am I? Okay, so I have had sort of a funny journey and maybe similar to some of you. I like started my PhD in 2020 and quickly realized that like I probably didn't want to stay in academia, didn't really necessarily want to stay in research. And sort of realized that like science writing was way more fun. I started by writing for a podcast that was like through a fellowship in my school, and just fell in love with it. I really liked the freedom that it gave me to think about different topics. I liked the timelines as well, that it was like a shorter timeline to get a piece out than it is to like do an entire study and publish it. I just work better on those like quicker timelines. So yeah, so I ended up doing a bunch of internships in like institutional writing, freelance for a bunch of different places, briefly wrote for this short series PBS show thing on PBS Terra. It was about food science, which is like not my field at all, but was super fun. This summer, I interned at Scientific American for a very, very brief time before I got my current position. Surprisingly, I wasn't expecting to get it. So that's why it was only like, 3 weeks or whatever at Scientific American, but it was a very fun 3 weeks. And so now I'm teaching in the critical writing program is what they call it at Penn. But I'm teaching science focused writing classes. So one on animal cognition and one on clinical neuroscience. So yeah, and then I finished my PhD in November, so just a couple months ago. And that was in cognitive science or cognitive neuroscience. So yeah, now I'm just taking the best break of my life and doing a lot of reading and fun stuff, and then hopefully I'll get back to freelancing soon. But yeah, so that's me. I was thinking I could just talk quickly through a couple of pieces just to sort of give you a sense of like the types of things I write about. So like I said, my PhD was in cognitive science, cognitive neuroscience. I was mostly actually exclusively studying humans. In undergrad, I studied rats and mice for a second, and realized I really didn't like that. But I'm super interested in animal cognition, especially octopus cognition. So I'd been following that research for a long time. And I ended up finding this paper, I guess it must have been in like November 2022. Thought it was super cool and pitched a news story about it to Scientific American. And this was the first time, I think it was the first time I had pitched them, and it got accepted, which is like, I'm realizing now kind of rare, because I'll pitch them now and it often gets rejected. So I got lucky. And yeah, and this was all about these sort of nerve cords that have this funky pattern between octopus arms. So anyway, that was really fun and cool. And I felt like just even having some interest and sort of background in that literature, even though I didn't have any research experience with octopuses, that super helped. And it just helped me identify like what a cool story would be in that realm. So it kind of made me realize that I can write about stuff that's not necessarily in my expertise, which maybe some of you are facing right now, where you're like writing about something that sort of know about, but it's not what you've been studying for years. And I think just like shaking off that, I don't know, self-doubt can be really helpful. So, okay. Yeah, I thought this was just a cute quote from one of the people I interviewed, which we're talking about quotes, so might as well highlight it. We are in that intriguing, mild state of confusion that is simultaneously perplexing and exhilarating when unexpected discoveries are revealed. So this is actually from an outside researcher who wasn't involved in the research. But yeah, felt like it gave a lot more like color to the story. And then I just kept writing about octopus cognition, this time vision specifically. So sort of was writing about octopuses as well as cuttlefish, and talking about, weird stuff in that realm. I also tend to write a lot about neuroscience, since that's more like related to my field, human neuroscience specifically. And this story was for Quanta, which is a super cool outlet. If you are not familiar with them, definitely go read their stuff. It's like very thorough and thoughtful, and they like treat their writers really well. So yeah, this one was about the default mode network, and was just sort of chronicling like what that is, and what it was thought to be, 20 years ago when we first learned about it. And that was really cool and sort of contentious because there's like a lot of debate around that network and how much it matters and what it does even now. So that was sort of fun. And then just actually in November, I wrote this piece about aha moments, also for Quanta. And yeah, go read it. There's some fun like visuals that I think are sort of entertaining. So yeah, anyway, that's a sort of smattering of things that I like to write about. And let's see, was there anything else I wanted to add about that? Yeah, no, mostly in the realm of like neuroscience, biology, psychology, that kind of stuff. I guess it might be worth mentioning that I usually write news stories and feature stories. So I'm not as familiar with these case studies that you're doing. And I teach op-ed writing, but I've actually never written one, so I'm not as familiar with that. But happy to like talk about those realms as well. And yeah, I'm excited to learn more about these case studies and see them when they come out. Okay, so yeah, now I was just going to move on to quoting. So yeah, quotes can be incredibly helpful in a story, and I think they're actually crucial. Interviewing is probably my favorite part of the writing process. I mean, I know it's not necessarily writing, but definitely one of my favorite parts of just sort of putting a story together. And I probably more so than other people rely on quotes to actually structure my story. So I usually won't even have an outline by the time I interview someone. I go in with a ton of questions, but I sort of leave it open-ended to see what comes up for them, what they think is most interesting, what they highlight, what they, I don't know, maybe have a really good metaphor for that I didn't expect. And I sort of let that guide the story. Let's see. And yeah, one way I like to think of it is like if science itself is like this, if the science of the story itself is this like black and white coloring book, then quotes can sort of be those markers to come in and give life to the story and highlight certain parts more than others, or bring your attention to one part of the scene more than another, and sort of give it context and personality. So, and I actually took a lot of this from Abdullahi's piece. We did a like science writing retreat thing recently together, and I saw he posted this, so I thought it would be really helpful. So yeah, one thing that quotes can sort of do in a piece is they can show emotion, which I think is like one of the main things we learn when we're learning how to interview and learning what to use quotes for. Emotion is sort of the first thing that comes to mind. So when you look back at your transcript of your interview and you think about, what parts of the interview were like the most lively, what parts did the person express the most emotion in, or excitement, surprise, frustration? Were there certain parts of the scientific process that were really difficult for them and really annoying? Were there findings that were really surprising or unexpected, or like, I don't know, frustrating in some way to like analyze? Trying to think for you guys since you're doing like ethics. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's parts of that like, uh, you know, might make emotions bubble up. So if you can highlight those as you're going through those transcripts, I think that's really helpful. It might not always be like, I don't know, the best thing to include in a story, but just identifying those places might help you sort of figure out what could be good candidate quotes. I also really like when um, when a quote can sort of highlight this imagery that a person has already thought about. Obviously, these people think about their research all the time, and so they probably have some metaphors that they like lean on or have like developed over the years. Um, and sometimes those can be super helpful, and they're maybe more fleshed out than something you could come up with in the like month that you're writing this. Um, so I really liked this one from someone I interviewed for that first story in Quanta. These activated areas don't act independently, but rather harmonize in synchrony with each other. You can't think about a symphony orchestra as just the violins or the oboes, Rachel said. Similarly, in a brain network, the individual parts interact to bring about effects that they can only produce together. So here, that little comment from Rachel actually helped me sort of structure an entire part of the story. I use this metaphor of like a symphony throughout an entire part of this long story. So that can be really helpful. And I think if that came up for you, definitely highlight that and like run with it if you like the metaphor, and let that sort of guide you if you can. Yeah, quotes can also provide context. And I mean, depending on the field, there might be like more of this sort of unspoken history or like conflict that's not necessarily, you're not going to find it in like scientific papers or maybe anywhere written down. But it's possible that, you know, everyone in the field kind of knows about it and it's like in the zeitgeist of the field. And that can be really helpful to provide context to your readers. So if there's any point at which the interviewee told you how their research sort of fits into how the field previously understood this problem, or like where were the debates in this field before, and how is this new finding sort of fitting into those? Or it sounds like some of your interviewees are working in this like middle ground between two fields, and they're in this like super interdisciplinary place. Is that the first time that these two disciplines have worked together on this problem? Was there a reason that they hadn't? Was there some sort of conflict or like difference in opinion that might have kept those two fields apart? That sort of context can just, I guess, be really helpful for the reader, but also can like build tension and like this, I don't know, interpersonal element to it that can make something more interesting to read. So it's nice when a quote can do that. Quotes can express an opinion, which I, as someone who like I said, I never write op-eds. So I'm never writing something with my own opinion in it. I'm working on it, trying to write a pitch right now. We'll see how it goes. But I pretty much just stay as objective as possible when I'm writing a piece. But it is really nice when someone I'm interviewing can express an opinion and I can include that to sort of add that element of an opinion, even though it's not from me. So yeah, looking back at your transcript, did the interviewee share an opinion about the state of their field, the potential of a new tool, maybe how people in their field should go about thinking about ethics and they're not, or maybe it's a critique of how the field currently is or is not thinking about ethics. Something like that might be, again, sort of helpful to just like spice up the piece, and also maybe guide it, depending on how big the opinion is or how central. Okay. So yeah, how to not use quotes effectively. A couple things I wanted to just mention. Also because I've seen some of this in my own students and have been trying to like get them out of the habit of doing this. But I would say don't use quotes to explain something factual that you could write more succinctly or like interestingly yourself. I think Sarah was saying that you've like dealt with, you know, wanting to include all of the quotes that you possibly can because the person just said it really nicely. But from a reader's perspective, it's actually just nice to have things written in a consistent voice. instead of having to switch back and forth all the time to a different, a quote from someone. So in general, I think when you're, describing the methods, for example, of like how they did something, it's probably just easier for the reader to digest all of that in your voice, rather than like inserting a quote where it's not needed. And I'm happy to talk about like edge cases if you're not sure if something counts, but generally that's like a good rule of thumb. Also, yeah, so don't use quotes with a lot of jargon, which I know is tough, especially depending on who you interviewed and how they speak. Scientists can get really locked into their jargon. If you do have a quote where you're like, oh, they said this thing so well, but they use this one word that, no one's going to understand. Of course, you can always do paraphrase that one word, and just do like a bracket around it. But in general, I just try to like avoid those quotes if possible. And obviously you already did your interview, but in the future, if you do an interview like that, you can always ask them like, can you say that, but like as if I'm a third grader, or could you say that, but without using this word? And they're usually happy to do that. And then, yeah, don't simply quote because you haven't had a quote for a while for a few paragraphs. There's no rules about how often you need to quote or how many paragraphs you should go before you quote again. Just do it if the quote is helpful. Don't feel like you have to include a quote. Okay, just gonna check on time. Okay, we're good. Cool. So yeah, I keep mentioning transcriptions, and I'm not sure if you all are using like a transcription service or maybe if you Zoomed or something, you're just using Zoom. But definitely just find a transcription program that you like. Maybe it's Zoom, maybe it's something else. I use Pinpoint. It's not perfect. It honestly doesn't work super well, but it's free and it keeps all of your files, I don't know, organized in a way that I like. So I've gotten used to using that. Before I was using Otter AI, and then I think there was something with like security of your data that I didn't love. And then also they like made the free version super pared down. So I switched to Pinpoint, but yeah, that's sort of an eternal struggle. But yeah, definitely just super helpful to have transcription to just be able to like look through and highlight things. Okay, any questions about quoting? I'm also happy to like workshop things if you want. Like if you had, I don't know, someone who was really particularly hard to quote or yeah.
In my case, as far as you were talking, I was counting the number of quotes that I made,
Mhm.
and and
Is
I
it
definitely
like,
quoted.
yeah, you quoted. Good. That's great.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah. So I have several of them.
good.
Yeah, but I feel that I don't know. I'll try to look at them in an insightful way because they can be useful, they can give context, but not necessarily a nexus. So I hope to find a balance. But I think that, yeah, every page I have several quotes. So
Yeah,
I might have been exceeding a bit. Yeah.
that's okay. Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking about my writing process and so like I'll usually do the interview and then I'll sort of write down an outline of how I want things to flow, but it's very bare bones. And then I'll just slot in the quotes to each part of that outline. Like this would work really well as a beginning quote, or this would work really well as like a closing quote, or this is a really good quote for like
Mhm.
explaining how they did the thing. And so my early drafts are like mostly quotes. So I don't think you're like on the wrong track by doing that. And then you can always like it's easier to take
Okay.
out a quote than to add in a quote because if you add in a quote, you have to go back to the transcript and
Mm.
like look through it. And so if you just want to take out a quote and easy to do. So you're not doing anything wrong. Yeah.
Woof, woof.
Yeah. You're good. You're good.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any like, I don't know, quote questions?
This is like a really like I guess like practical question. I've written like a couple of pieces before where I've had to quote people. And I feel like I always pull quotes that are like 5 or 6 sentences long. And I'm
Mm.
like, there's something good in here,
Okay.
but I
Yeah.
don't know how to, like maybe the whole paragraph is really kind of explaining one big idea, but like trying to pare
Mm.
it down to something that like I don't know, I feel like my guideline or like what I've seen before is like 2 sentences
I was
for a
gonna say
quote.
two. Yeah.
And so then I'm like, well, how do I get it down to that? So like
Yeah.
taking
Honestly,
out,
I feel
I
like
mean, and taking
yeah.
out or like filler stuff, but like
Mhm.
then how much is acceptable to edit, too.
Oh yeah. Oh, and there's debate about this too. Like I've had people tell me that I can't take I think out of a quote, and then I've had other people like most editors will say that's fine. Um, so I think in early stages it's fine to just include the whole thing. Um, I think for a long quote, I guess when I encounter that, it's usually one because they repeated themselves a bit, and I just need like one half or the other, and they're both pretty good, and I should just pick one. Or it's that they said they had one really good sentence and then a few sentences and then another really good sentence, and it's like you could just take out the middle part if it's not necessary. But yeah, I think getting it down to two would be good. Alternatively, if you think splitting it up into two separate quotes and using them at different parts of the story would make sense. I think that's also fine. But that's tough I mean, that's a good problem to have. At least the person was like eloquent and like said something interesting. But yeah, good question.
Yeah, I think I don't know, I would put, I wasn't sure like what like if I could actually use a dot dot dot, like the
Hmm.
ellipses,
Oh
or like
yeah.
I've tended to try to avoid it because I'm like, well, then it's obvious that I'm editing and
Taking
some
stuff
people have
out.
feelings about that. So then
Yeah.
I tend to say things like, comma, this person said, and then like continue the quote on the next sentence.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, kind
This,
of similar like
yeah.
to that.
Oh, I guess I didn't do that thing. Anyway, but yeah, you could just say like, Wrinkle said, and then continue the quote.
Hmm.
Um, Yeah, actually, it's like a lot of editors will end up doing that just if they see a big quote or um they sometimes don't want like Rachel said at the end of like a paragraph or at the end of a piece, so they'll just smush it in the middle of a quote.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that's another good tactic. I think 5 sentences might still be kind of long, but you could make it seem like, fewer if you break it up a little bit like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Good questions. Okay, sweet. Well, I guess I'll move on to leads. I love this little like description of a lead. So this lead walks into a bar. All the patrons turn and look at what just walked in. Then this nut graph walks into the bar. All the patrons now understand why the lead walked in, and they all decide whether to pay attention to who walks in next or to go back to what they were doing before. There's no punchline because this is not a joke. This is more of a fable. The moral of the fable is the lead will tell you what is going on, and the nut graph will tell you why you should care. And this is from an open notebook piece. I think I saw the open notebook linked in that document you just sent. So you guys are already familiar with the open notebook. Super helpful resource. And this piece is all about leads. Um, so finding an angle for a lead, and it's possible that in your format you like won't have necessarily like a separate lead and a nut graph or whatever, but I think the same approach can still be really helpful. So yeah, finding a lead can be tough, especially when you're talking about something like ethics and animal testing or something that's sort of delicate. It sort of constrains the types of tactics you can use to get into a story. Um, but I'll just go through a few just to sort of get your wheels turning and see if any of them stick. But I'd encourage you to just sort of read through stories that you like, maybe on similar topics, and just see how those stories start. And if any of those sort of vibe with you, you can sort of emulate that in your own piece. Um, okay, so first is to tie it to a news event. You'll see this a lot with like op-eds where
you read the beginning of it and you're like, this is so timely. Like, I can't believe they just wrote this in the last week. And it's like, then you get into it and you realize they probably had this sitting on their desk for a while and they were like waiting for a news event to make it relevant. And so the same might be applied to your piece that you're writing now. And you could maybe see if there's a news event that came up that's relevant to it. But this one was about 23andMe, or related to 23andMe filing for bankruptcy. And then it was all about the ethics of holding genetic data and sharing it. And that was for Undark, which, again, if you're not familiar, is like a super good outlet. Another is to make the reader laugh, which, again, in some of your cases might be sort of difficult. But I really like Darren in Corva. I should know how to say his last name. We're like vaguely friends. But I think it's in Corva. He does a lot of like really good comical science writing. And I loved this piece. It started, the feisty Lord Howe Island stick insect crawling on the gloved hand of Kyle Castle, a keeper at the San Diego Zoo, had no idea that he shouldn't exist. The intrepid insect, nicknamed a tree lobster, because some grow to 8 inches long, seemed determined to prevent me from snapping a good picture as he raced about Mr. Castle's hands like a dog with the zoomies. So we've got he shouldn't exist, we've got dog with the zoomies, like just very fun, I don't know, ways of putting it that like get you intrigued by this insect that you otherwise probably wouldn't want to read about. So yeah, really like that sort of, I guess, approach if it's appropriate. Another is to sort of find common ground with your reader. And this one I thought did a really good job. It was about a story about coffee. So this person, Maggie Chen, who's another great writer, said, the thought of a steaming cup of coffee helps to pull many people worldwide out of bed in the morning. Scientists have consistently linked this ubiquitous drink to lowered risk for maladies such as heart disease, colon cancer, and type 2 diabetes, but its effect on the gut microbiome, the intestinal bacterial population, thought to help mediate between diet and health, are largely unknown. So again, it's like, if you just started maybe in the second sentence, it might be sort of dry. But having that first sentence where she links it to, everyone's or most people's first experience of the day, is like kind of helpful and brings people in. Okay, another one is to tell a story, which is probably more appropriate in certain venues and contexts than others, but I think the transmitter does this a lot and does it pretty well. So this one says, Becca, I have something to tell you. During a conference coffee break in 2019, I looked up to see a longtime colleague approaching me with what appeared to be great urgency. What could his exciting news be, I wondered. He looked at me and beamed. I studied a female. And this story was all about, I believe it was studying female rats in neuroscience. So yeah, and again, the transmitter, another great outlet, which I think would be super relevant to some of your topics. So yeah, this one you can, if you had a personal experience, maybe with, with the person you interviewed or with, I don't know, with something related to their research or some ethical dilemma that this person's research addresses, that could help. If they mentioned a personal anecdote, you could open with that as well. And you don't have to quote them for the whole thing. You just quote parts of it. But yeah, I think this is just sort of a nice, like, very human way to get into a story. And then the final one that can be a little bit tricky, I almost regretted suggesting this to my undergrads because I feel like they took it too far, but it's to engage the reader's imagination. So this one by Timnit Gebru, and I'm not sure how to say the other person's name, they were writing about what would happen if like all of these jobs got taken over by AI in the federal government. And they sort of asked us to like imagine this dystopia with them. And I think that was super like effective in this case. I feel like it can work in some cases better than others. I had students who would we were doing this class on animal cognition, and so they'd be like, imagine being a bird and flying over the city of Philadelphia. It's like, okay, I don't know if that was the most effective, and I can't exactly explain why, but it can be a hit or a miss. So go about this one with caution, but I do think it's a pretty common way to start a story. So yeah, anyway, those are just some, pieces of inspiration for thinking about how to start your story. But I think in general, thinking about any sort of human connection you can have with the reader can be super helpful. And just thinking about what would bring them into this story. And I usually leave this part for last, unless there's something that like super piques my interest right at the start of writing. I'll sort of write a bit of the beefier parts and then come back to this and see like, okay, given what I've written, how could I grab people's attention with this? Yeah. Any questions about leads? I guess you're sort of far from writing this because you just did your interviews. But yeah, if you have questions come up, I'm happy to like help. There's also lots of resources on, the Open Notebook and probably elsewhere about like thinking about leads. It's tricky. So don't feel bad if you like don't have an idea yet. I think somebody else said this when they were introducing themselves that like this is the trickiest part for a lot of people. Just thinking about like how to open a story. It's very intimidating. I think also just like trying a few different ways and seeing what sticks might be good just to give yourself options. So yeah. Okay. So now I was just going to go through some like ways to get into science communication outside of SEEDS. And there are so many options. So I'll just go through a few. Oh, this is outdated, sorry. But SciComm Bytes is great. They have all these different sort of themed blogs. So they have like Astrobytes and like Chem Bytes. And those are a really great way to just like write a quick news story and get some feedback on it, and just get a piece published. And having clips is super helpful when you're actually starting to like pitch to actual outlets. They just like to see examples of your writing. They like to see that you've worked with an editor. So I think that's a really great starting point. Also knowing neurons, if you're into neuroscience, that's a good one. We already got CompSciCon up there. Joining the NASW, the National Association of Science Writers, was a really good move for me when I did it in like my second year of grad school. I think the student memberships are like $20 a year or something like that. It's super affordable. So definitely do that. They have a lot of like resources and meetups and whatever. And they also have this mentoring program. I think they still have it. It sort of goes on and off, but they also have like an internship meetup coming up soon where you can like meet and greet with different people who run science writing internships. Yeah, and then there's also this other mentoring program, which is great. Trying to think if there's anything else I want to mention. Yeah, no. The Open Notebook also has I think it's, what's it called? Early Career Fellowship or something like that, that I've also heard really good things about. So yeah, just keep an eye out for those. But NASW is good because it sort of tells you about all of them. So it's just like a good one-stop shop. I also think just like reading a lot is helpful. I know that sounds really basic, but just reading writers that you like and figuring out what styles you like can be super helpful. Also figuring out what outlets you like. Because once you start pitching, it's like really important that you understand the outlet that you're pitching to and sort of what style of stories they take. So the more that you've read from them, the better. But also these three books, or like The Best American Science and Nature comes out every year. But those are all really helpful and have been super helpful for me. Oh, I'll also just highlight the Science Writing News Roundup email list. is great, especially if you're looking for SciComm jobs. I think it's like $3 a month. So it's sort of, I just pay for it when I'm actually looking for a job. But they have a really good list, and it like comes out, I think, yeah, well, once a week. Um, and it's just, yeah, it's great. They, label everything really nicely. And they have links to places that are like asking for pitches and whatnot. So that's a really good thing to check out. And then the fact checking workshops have been really helpful for me in the past. I did them years ago, but I think they're still doing them. So yeah, okay. Yeah, and obviously the AAAS Mass Media Fellowship, I'm sure you all have heard about that. It's great. And the conversation, obviously, given that most of you or a lot of you are postdocs, that's a great outlet. I think if you're a PhD student, you like have to write with your advisor or something like that. I'm not sure of all the rules, but that's a really good one in general. And then the op-ed project is cool if you're like into writing op-eds. Yeah. Okay. Oh, okay. One thing, and then I'll open it up for questions. So choosing opportunities can be really hard, especially when you have like all these different options, and it's like they're going to be a time commitment, and you have all of your research that you obviously still need to do. So one of my mentors told me you should think about taking an opportunity on 3 dimensions. Does it pay, or does it pay well? Does it teach me something new or interesting? And does it align with my values? And sometimes you can compromise on one, but make sure you're not compromising on all three. Or that's like sort of a good framework to like compare opportunities as well. Yeah, okay. All right, here's just a ton of other links to things. A lot of them are from the Open Notebook. This outlets to pitch one is a huge Google Doc that has a ton of outlets and like the emails for their editors and a bunch of other stuff. So I'll send you these slides, and I think you can just click on that. Cool. All right. So let's chat. Feel free to ask any questions about stuff I talked about or stuff I didn't talk about. Happy to talk about whatever.
Thanks so much, Nora. Do you want to stop sharing your screen so we can potentially all bug eye at each other at least a little bit?
Yeah, sounds good. Sorry, that was kind of a
Yeah.
little, but
Well, I'll turn it over to writers for a moment. Anything that came up that you want to know more about, particularly about getting started or quotes, since that's where you all are?
and I'll just share these slides in the chat so you have them.
Perfect.
I can let others go first if they have something a little more focused on quotes and stuff like that. But I was just curious, nut graph and lead like as terminology are new to me. So maybe you talked about leads and gave really helpful examples, but I did a short Google, but maybe you could talk more about the nut graph and if that's something you'd recommend incorporating in our case studies.
Yeah, that was kind of I probably should have thought about that. So thanks for bringing it up. Yeah, nut graph, so a lead is usually like the spicy, spunky thing at the beginning, and then a nut graph sort of explains the basics. So in a news story, it's like, researchers at the University of Rochester found whatever, and they published it in a study in Nature on Tuesday or whatever. So it's a bit more dry, but it's sort of the informative background you need to understand like why you even started the story to begin with. And you'll see it if you look at like, I don't know, like Scientific American news stories or whatever. Once you sort of know to look for it, you'll start seeing it everywhere. But yeah, that's sort of what that is. They're not always separate paragraphs, but many times, yeah.
So I imagine for case studies, this might be a very brief description of who your person is and what they do in their day job, right? Like, Lomax Boyd is a neuroscientist who studies this, and this. I sat down and had a conversation with him about ethics. Proceed. The nut graph is going to be that little bit that's about what is the focus or subject that comes after the fun and engaging bit.
Yeah. And I feel like also I mean, just thinking about structure in general, it's super helpful to like look at an outlet and see what's consistent about their structure and what's not. Like, don't go off of one piece, but if you find a few that you like and just be like, okay, they all have these two paragraphs, I should probably start with that. Because I feel like just going wild with structure is like very intimidating to me. So I usually like to have sort of a template. So that could be helpful if you're also looking for that. Yeah,
Thanks. I feel like it's cool to have terminology for some of these things that you might recognize in practice, but not know how to refer to.
totally. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm curious
Oh.
your approach, Nora, for keeping a narrative throughout your piece. So when you sort of start to lose those certain pieces of structure, right? You've gone beyond your
Mhm.
lead, you've gone beyond your nut graph, you're now just in the
Mhm.
core of your piece. How do you decide what your focus is and how you're going to make sure that it's incorporated throughout?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess so with news stories, I feel like it's much more like laid out for you to begin with because they're all sort of written the same way. It's like, you know, lead, nut graph, and then like a little background and then methods and whatever. It's like sort of like a shortened scientific paper. But I think you can look to feature stories to see these different ways that people structure their pieces. Um, with mine, I often like to go chronologically, just because that like makes the most sense to me, and that's like how I consume the research usually. Um, and so for that like that quanta piece about the default mode network, that was sort of like, okay, the first section was all about the 90s and like the early years of figuring out what this is. And then it sort of went forward in time. And that structure really helps me because I'm kind of like, okay, this piece belongs here, and this is how it relates to the like main overall point. So usually breaking it into like three sections really helps. If you have like a longer piece. So I'm not sure how long you said 1,000 to 1,500
Up to
words.
1500. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's more feature piece length than like news story length, but
Mhm.
less than like long form New Yorker piece.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I think even if you just use the sections in the outlining process and end up scrapping them in the main piece, I think it just helps with flow a lot. So even if you're like not allowed to have subheadings or something in the outlet, and that's just like the outlet's policy, I do think it's helpful to just be like, okay, here I'm talking about this part of the problem, and here I'm talking about another part of the problem. Um, just so you know like how all of it fits together. Yeah. Yeah, so I usually figure that out at the outlining phase. I'm very bad at like starting to write a story and then figuring out like how things need to fit together. Yeah, that's a good question though. And then I saw the comment in the chat that it's on Canva. I love Canva. I swear by Canva. If they want to sponsor me, that would be great.
I saw you on.
I was just gonna bring up the comment in the chat.
Nice. Yeah.
Right.
This is a
You
bit.
mentioned, oh, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I was just curious, because you did a PhD in science and then kind of pivoted to teaching writing. So I was just kind of
Yeah.
interested in like what that experience has been like for you,
Mhm.
and like parallels or like big differences that surprised you.
Yeah. Yeah, and I actually started in September, so it's I've only taught one semester so far, but how I got there was like probably a year and a half ago or like 2 years ago. I started looking around and I was like, things aren't going great. There's not a ton of like science journalism jobs opening up, or I mean, I guess this would have been like about a year and a half ago. Anyway, it's hard to get a science journalism job. And also, I wasn't really sure I wanted that, like, I don't know, lifestyle. It's just like a lot of being online all the time, especially if you're working in a newsroom. And so I was like, okay, what else can I do? And I had been teaching these like workshops here and there about science writing, and I really liked that. I did a CompSciCon, a different flag, not the flagship one, a different one. And I really liked it. I was like, this is so fun to just like help people figure out how to talk about their science. Um, and so I started like doing more of that. And then I actually worked at my university's writing center as like a writing consultant for grad students and loved it. And I was like, okay, I think I could see myself like doing something like this full time. So yeah, that's how it happened. My program's sort of weird because like we all have PhDs in different disciplines. So there's like a physics guy and like a anthropology guy and whatever. Um, so we're all sort of coming at this from like a weird place where none of us studied writing studies. So I feel like I'm in good company, at least. I don't feel like underqualified to do this. But yeah, it is sort of a funny pivot. Um, what have I realized? Um, I think funnily enough, I've realized that I don't miss research as much as I thought I might. Um, I think I had been in it, like I have been doing scientific research for like, I don't know, 13 years. Like it's been a long time. So it was weird to let that go. But yeah, I think, and I'm still adjusting, but I think pivoting has actually been really helpful. And like there's a little bit of heartbreak, but I feel much better about this choice. Yeah. Yes, attend your local ComSciCon. I used to run the one at the Science Writers Conference, which is sort of a unique spot to be in because you get to go to this whole conference as well. But I've heard the other ones are great too.
Plus
All
one to
right.
the SciRai ComSciCon. I
Yeah?
went a couple years ago. It was great.
Wait, what year did you do it?
2023. I don't even know
Okay.
what time is now. It was right before I defended and I lost all sense of time. So
Okay, fair. That's cool. That's cool. Nice.
All right. Well, it is 7:26. Nora, thank you so, so, so much
Yeah.
for agreeing to come and speak to us and for all of your wonderful tips and advice. I feel like as our writers are getting started, it'll be super helpful to have been able to have spoken to you and hear a little bit about both your experience as a science writer, because part of being involved in Seeds is being at that point in your career where you're sort of deciding and thinking about what matters and what you're emphasizing in terms of what you want
Mhm.
to do next. So that's really great. I'm going to
Yeah.
share just a couple more slides that just have our fond farewells for the day with you all to leave you all with some reminders, and then we will end the call for today. So yay, Seeds. Thank you so much for attending our second kickoff event. We really hope that these are helpful to you, as well as being sort of fun and opportunity to get to talk to one another and sort of hear where people are. Please keep in touch with each other. Please come to office hours. We want to see you. And I feel like office hours get such this reputation that you have to have some particular question. You're now in your writing phase. So if you just want somebody to body double and just be on the call with you to get some writing done, or to brainstorm, or even to share like paragraphs or quotes with each other and get started on some of that peer process, office hours, or as I like to refer to them, co-working hours, are a really great way to do this. And then be sure to check out our new webpage and blog posts that just got put up. The QR codes here are going to give you access to those. And then make sure that you enjoy the creative process and have fun with it. This is the part where you really get to start to think about who you are as a science writer and put that onto the page. We are here to help you out. I see that Nora has also put her email in the chat, which is really wonderful. So you have all of these resources available to you. Our next office hour is on Monday, on the 12th. And as usual, we will be using the Discord audio for that. But again, if it would be helpful, if you're like, I really prefer Zoom, that's where I want to do office hours, do let us know, provide that feedback. You can email any of us, and we will get that information to the people that it needs to go to. But yes, so we hope to see you and interact with you in the near future. Don't forget, end of the month, January 26th, is when we expect to see that first draft from you. And we expect that to be dropped in the drive into the draft folder. So I believe that is everything. Thank you, of course, to our seed sponsors, the Rita Allen Foundation and the Kavli Foundation, who make all of this possible, as you know, and then our wonderful team who have put together events like this for you, as well as our sort of process with this as a whole. And we're very happy to have you all here. Have a wonderful rest of your evening.